The First Dervish. I stand here before you, my lady, to tell you my story how I became a dervish with a plucked eye. I was born Aziz, the son of one of the greatest merchants of Persia. I had a favorite cousin called Azetis, and we played together every day, some days happily, other days we would fall out and argue, but we loved each other dearly. Our fathers agreed to marry us as soon as we had reached the age of puberty, but then death carried out both her parents, and Azetis came to live with us. We were not kept apart indeed. We shared everything, even a bed, and when we had both reached puberty, my father decided that it was time to draw up a marriage contract, and preparations for a wedding began. The marble oars throughout the house were polished, new rugs laid out, the walls decorated with brocade hangings, and then neat dishes and sweetmeats were created for the banquet. On the promised day, my mother sent me to the public hammam, where I was pommeled and massaged with amber and musk, dressed in a nest of suits, and then sprinkled with perfume. I left the hammam and set out for home, but when I passed a lane in which a friend of mine lived, I decided to knock at his door and invite him to attend my wedding. His mother told me he would be home soon. Would I wait for him? I strolled down the lane a little way to wait, noting that each person that I passed inhaled the pleasant fragrance which wafted out before me. I found a little bench and sat down, sides carefully spreading out my handkerchief so as not to soil my beautiful suit and upset my mother. Suddenly a white handkerchief uttered down from above like tiny butter wire. I caught it in my hand. It was as delicate as the breeze. I looked up to see who had dropped the handkerchief. Saw a young woman at a window. She was so beautiful that she could have said to the moon, "Step down, for I am more beautiful than you." She smiled and I smiled back, and then she put one jar in her mouth, and then she joined her middle jar to her index finger and hid both between her two breasts. Then she disappeared. With a throbbing heart, I waited for her to reappear. Never before had I experienced such feelings. I glanced down at the handkerchief and saw that it was knotted. When I untied the knot, a slip of paper fell from it, upon which were written these lines. My lover asked, "Why does your writing scarcely scratch the page?" I answered softly, "Because my fate as a lover is lowly. Wither it away." I remained sitting on the bench, with one eye on the window and the other on the handkerchief, limp with desire and longing, desperate to be with this woman. Only after I had nearly given up hope of her repairing did I return home, distraught and sad, her face etched upon my imagination, my hand clenched around the handkerchief, the scrap of paper hidden in my pocket. When I reached the house, I found Azetis weeping. "Where were you?" she asked. She described how everybody, including the greatest merchants and emirs, the Qadi, the witnesses, and relatives, gathered and waited in vain for me for several hours, but eventually gave up when I did not appear. My father was so furious with me that he swore that he would not drop the contract for another year. I was so worried about you, cousin. I thought that some terrible fate must have befallen you, but now I see that you are safe. I can thank God. Tell me what happened." And so I answered. What happened was bizarre and strange. I told her about the young woman and showed her the handkerchief and the slip of paper. She took the handkerchief and smelled it, read the lines written on the scrap of paper, and tears ran down her cheeks. But I could think only of the mysterious gestures of the woman, and so I asked my cousin Azetis, "Can you help me to understand what she was trying to tell me?" She wiped her tears away with her sleeve and said, "If you asked me for my eye, cousin, I would pull it out from beneath my eyelid. First of all, the handkerchief is the lover's greeting. By placing the finger in her mouth, she is saying that you are the soul in her body, and that she would hold on to you as morally as the teeth sit in the mouth. The two lines of poetry are obvious. She is assuring you that her soul is bound to yours. And Nellie, when she put her fingers between her breasts, she was telling you to come back and meet her in 2 days and relieve her of her distress at being parted from you." I accepted my cousin's interpretation, for she was more mature than I, even though we were the same age, and she understood the ways of the world. But cousin, I don't think that I can wait 2 whole days to see her. But Azedis took my head in her hands and rested it on her lap, stroked my hair, consoled me, and entertained me until the time came for me to meet the young woman again. Azedis helped me to dress and sprinkled drops of perfume on my clothes. She told me that I must be strong and determined. Aziz, she said, all I want is to see you happy. Out in the street, I felt that everything around me had disappeared. The shops, houses, passers-by. I heard nothing. I reached her window, saw her looking down, took a deep breath, and almost fainted. This time she held a red handkerchief in her hand, which she lowered and raised outside the window 3 times, in the direction of the lane below. Then she spread out her 5 fingers and struck her breasts with her palm. Next she produced a mirror, which she held out of the window, and then put her head out for a few moments before closing the window and disappearing. I found myself standing beneath the window for a long time after she had gone, mesmerized and yet unable to comprehend her signs. At last, at midnight, I gave up hope of seeing her again and made my way reluctantly back home, dragging my feet as I went. When I arrived, I found Azedis weeping and singing to herself. I love him, oh how I love him. His love has occupied my heart. When she saw me, she dried her tears and lifted her head, as if asking me what had happened. I began to tell her the story, but I found myself fainting dead away. When I came to, my cousin was holding me and wiping the tears from my face. I told her everything, and she sighed, saying, "You should not be distressed, cousin. Her signs must give you great hope." The 5 gems of mean returned to me in 3 days. The red handkerchief and the mirror and her head out of the window mean sit in the dyer's studio until you hear from me. How right you are, cousin, I said joyfully. There is a Jewish dyer of wool and rugs in the lane where she lives. But when I realized that I will not see the young woman again for 5 days, I wept. Be strong, my cousin, Azedis told me. Think of the lovers who wait month after month, even years before their Nelly. United, rely upon me, and I promise that I will help and protect you, just as the dove protects its chicks beneath its wings. She got up and prepared me some food and drink, but I could not swallow even one morsel. Azedis sought to distract me with tales of love and passion, leaving my side only when exhaustion overtook me and I slept. When I awoke, even in the dead of night, I would find her beside me, tears coursing down her cheeks. The 5 days dragged, as if it was for centuries that had passed. When the time came, I left my bed and found hot water waiting for me. I bathed and dressed in fresh clothes. God be with you, Azedis said to me. I hope that you get what you want from your beloved. I hurried to the Jewish dyer's shop, and to my mortification found that not only was the shop closed up, but so was the young woman's window. I thought of taking my own life, such was my distress, but instead I remained like a statue on the bench beneath her window, until the hour of midnight struck and I dragged myself home. I found Azedis standing, one arm clutching a peg on the wall, the other pressed to her heart, sighing and singing to herself. The furnace in my heart could melt copper. My tears could drench 30 deserts. My love can be no greater than what I cherish. Yet my lover sees my passion as a blemish. As soon as she saw me, Azedis wiped away her tears and smiled. Why have you not spent the night with your beloved and Nelly? Achieved that for which you have ached? Realizing that she was mocking me, I kicked her with all my strength so that she fell to the ground and struck her head upon the threshold. Blood poured from her wound, but she got up without uttering a word and wiped her face. Nothing happened, just nothing. That is why I am in such a rage, I told her. You are mistaken, Azedis told me. There is good reason for hope in the lady's actions. She wishes to know whether you truly love her, And so she has hidden herself away in order to test you. You must go to her tomorrow, for if you do not, she will assume that you have no patience. Oh, cousin, I am glad that happiness is within reach. My cousin's words failed to soothe me, however, and I felt only more desperate. She ordered me some food, but I pushed it away, shouting, "Every damn lover is but a fool who can no longer eat or sleep." But that is precisely what love is about, Azadas told me. At first light the next day I ran down the lane and sat on the bench beneath the window. After a very short time the woman opened the window, and when she saw me she smiled. Her smile grew wider and she laughed. She disappeared for a moment and then returned carrying a lamp and a potted plant. She let her hair fall over her face and then put the lamp over the top of the plant and slammed the window shut. It is strange how my love seemed to grow and intensify, and yet at the same time I was tired of these mysterious signals. I had yet to hear her utter a single word. Perhaps she was deaf and dumb. I returned home, yet again perplexed and melancholy, but still deeply in love. I found my cousin with her head bandaged, weeping and singing to herself, "Wherever you may come and go, you are still secure in the depths of my heart." She saw me through her tears and fell silent for a moment, then roused herself and asked me what had happened. "At last you have reached what your soul has always desired," she told me when I described what had taken place. When she let her hair loose around her face, she was telling you to come to her at night, when darkness falls on the day. The pot means that you should meet her in her garden, and the lamp tells you to seek out a light in the darkness. And yet, rather than feel joy at this, I shouted at my cousin, "Each time you promise that I will nearly meet her, and yet I don't. I think that perhaps your interpretations are wrong." Lazadas laughed, saying, "Just be patient, and don't forget that God is always with those who show forbearance." I sat down and pleaded, "God, let the sun set even before it is time for night to fall." I deaded away the hours while my cousin sat nearby sighing and weeping. Soon night fell, and I was overjoyed and raced to the door as if someone had released me from a long imprisonment. Azadas called me back and gave me a piece of musk, saying, "Chew it when you see her, and when your beloved gives you what you so desire, recite these lines: Lovers, in the name of God, tell me how can one relieve this endless desperation?" When I reached the lane, I circled the house of the young woman and found my way into her garden at the back, for she had left the gate open for me. I followed a light in the distance and found a beautiful pergola inlaid with ebony and ivory, with a lamp hanging inside and furnished with comfortable seats and feather mattresses and cushions dotted about. Candles ickered, and I could hear the soothing sound of a water fountain, next to which stood a table spread with oars and herbs, and upon which stood a jug of wine and many delicacies, grilled chicken and game birds, fruit and sweetmeats. I waited there for many hours, and when she did not come I realized I was famished, and I fell upon the food as if it was the young woman I was nearly devouring. I ate until I was full, and then I stretched myself happily out among the cushions to wait some more. I woke suddenly, hot and drenched in sweat. The sun was beating down on me, as if it was smothering me with its rays. It was morning, and I jumped up as though I'd been bitten by a snake. A piece of coal and some salt had been placed upon my stomach. The garden was empty, and there was no sign of the pergola or the cushions, the candles, or the beautifully laden table. Filled with rage and utter despair, I returned to my cousin once more to see her, weeping and saying, "Forgive me if I shed these black tears, but your beloved loves you back, while the one I adore doesn't love me at all. How compassionate and kind God is to you." She stopped crying and came over to me and sniffed at my clothing. "That is not the scent of one who has enjoyed his beloved," she said, "and now I fear for you, Aziz. I know full well that women may tease men, but this woman has deliberately wounded your heart. She has aimed to hurt you as much as she possibly could." The salt that you left on your stomach means you are a pallid dish, which needs salt to add devour, lest you be spat out, and as if this was not insult enough, she leaves you with a piece of charcoal, meaning that she wishes God would blacken your face since you claim to be in love, but your passion really lies in eating and drinking. You're a charlatan lover. So, my cousin, this woman is hard and cruel. It is she who is deceitful, not you. Why did she not wake you when she found you asleep? How I wish that God would release you from her clutches. On the contrary, I thought to myself as I listened to Azatus, my beloved was right. I fell asleep when it is known that true lovers are insomniacs. I was unjust to myself and to my lover when I allowed greed to overtake desire. I thumped my chest and wept at my bad fortune, and pleaded with my cousin to help me, threatening to kill myself if she would not. Azeda said, if you asked for my eye, cousin, I would pull it out from beneath my eyelid for you. How I wish I could come and go from this house as I please, so I might bring the two of you together, for your sake rather than for hers. Listen to me, Aziz. Go back to her again, but this time you must not touch even one morsel of food, for that will be the spur to your appetite, and you know that a full belly will only make you sleepy. Go to her and don't forget to recite these lines before you leave. Lovers, in the name of God, tell me, how can one relieve this endless desperation? I entered the garden and saw that everything was as it had been the night before. This time I didn't touch a morsel of food. Instead, sat and wept and waited, but slowly boredom crept upon me, and I found myself at the table once more, saying that I'd have just one spoon of yogurt to soothe my beating heart, but it was just as Azadas told me. One mouthful only aroused my appetite, and I was unable to stop sampling the many dishes laid out on the table. Before I knew it, I was full, but now, instead of lying down, I sat with my head in my hands, and yet, despite my evil arts, I found that I fell into a deep sleep and dreamed that I was fully awake, slapping my face and sprinkling my eyes with water and rubbing my eyes so as not to doze off and to remain alert for our encounter. But in reality, I missed my opportunity, and once more the sun woke me, slashing me with its hot whips, and I found myself staggering for home, weeping. There I found Azadas, the tears running down her cheeks as she sang. My heart is shattered. My body is bleeding. Yet whatever pain my cousin inflicts on me, I welcome it with all my soul. I felt furiously angry. I reproached and cursed her and threw the items my beloved had left on my stomach at her, but my cousin ignored my tantrum and my angry words and knelt before me, saying, this large dice means that although you were waiting for her, your heart was absent. With the date stone, she is telling you that were you her true lover, you would have stayed awake, for your heart would have been on free, just as the date stone ignites the coal. As for the carob seed, she means that you must prepare yourself for separation from her and endure it with the patience of Job. When I heard the word separation, I clutched my cousin's dress and wept and pleaded, help me, Azadas, and save me before I perish and die. And my cousin, who seemed on that day distant and distracted, although I didn't care to know by what, answered me in a low voice. I feel as though my thoughts are tossed upon a raging sea. She fell silent for a while, but then seemed to take pity on me, for she said, go to her tonight and reconcile with her. I cannot give you advice other than these words, do not eat, do not eat. Then she prepared me a delicious meal and fed it to me herself, as if I were a lamb, so that I would not be tempted by the aroma of the delicacies that would be laid out before me in the garden that evening. And so I returned that evening, dressed in a new suit which Azadas had sewn for me, and which she had carefully dressed me in, making me such promise to say to the girl, lovers, in the name of God, tell me, how can one relieve this endless desperation? I found myself once more in the garden, tense and waiting for the woman, just like a tiger ready to pounce. So attuned was I to the tiniest of sounds that I heard even the minute rustling of a Nightingale preparing itself for sleep, but the silence and tranquility, with the moon and stars hanging above me, and the intensity of my desire and passion, made me relax a little and pour myself a glass of wine, so condemned was I that I would not fall asleep. I poured myself a second glass, pulling my eyes open all the while to ensure that they were not drooping, for I thought that a little more wine would help me to be lucid and eloquent when I finally met my beloved, and then, when she again failed to appear, my mood changed to one of utter irritation and impatience, and so I drank glass after glass until I lost count of how much wine I had consumed, and then I slept, just as I had on the 2 previous evenings. I was woken again by the earth rays of the sun, and found that I was stretched out in the garden, with a knife and a copper coin upon my stomach. I raced back home with the knife in my hand, and I must have looked insane, for people shrank back and even ran to avoid my path. As I reached our home, I heard the keening of my cousin. I am alone in this cursed house. Its walls tighten around my soul. Its windows waft towards me the foulest fumes. Its doors clench me by the throat. Her words moved me as if she was expressing what I myself felt so powerfully in my heart and mind. It seemed that I lost consciousness for a time, and then I woke to see my face drenched in rose water. The coin is for right eye and the knife is for slaughter, as Idas told me. I screamed in horror. Oh God, is my beloved going to take out her eye? But my cousin said, no, don't be alarmed. She is telling you, by God the Magnificent, I swear by my right eye that if you ever come back to my garden and sleep, be certain that I will slaughter you with this knife. I shook and trembled, not with fright but out of love. Compassion. My cousin registered the half smile on my face and guessed what I was thinking. I am so worried about you, cousin, she pleaded with me. This woman is hard, calculating, crafty, and her heart is lead with hatred tarnished black. But I pleaded with her in turn. Help me and tell me what to do. Aziz, if you asked for my eye, my cousin Aziz, I would pull it out from beneath my eyelid for you. Come to bed and sleep. This is what you need now. Try to sleep as though you were hibernating. She took me by the hand and led me to my bed, where she massaged my shoulders and limbs, fanning my face until I fell asleep, and didn't wake until the sun had set. When Azeda saw that I had woken, she jumped up, wiping away her tears. Then she forced me to eat a large meal, made me drink tamarind, washed my face and hands, and then took me in her arms and held me tight to her, saying, Aziz, you must listen carefully. Your beloved will not appear before the last hours of the night, so do not sit and wait, but seek to keep yourself occupied. Take a stroll in the garden, making sure to smell the oars, especially the jasmine, for its fragrance will surely dominate your senses and overpower the aroma of the banquet. I was careful to take Azeda's advice, and nearly all of the night had passed, and the cocks were crowing their threats, when I heard slight sound. I turned and was confronted by the sight of my beloved entering the garden, accompanied by 10 women slaves, just like the moon surrounded by stars. She laughed when she saw me, saying, I can see now that you are a true lover, for you have not been taken by sleep. So agonized were you by the fear that you would never see me. She bade her slaves to leave us, and we fell into each other's arms and kissed. I sucked her top lip and she sucked my lower one, and then as she undid her drawers, I found that my desire and excitement acted on their own, working on her until her limbs surrendered to me and made her reach the 7th heaven of ecstasy. And then I followed her, losing myself completely in the moment. When we both came slowly back from our trance, I heard myself declaring to her that I was born as of that moment, and that my soul from now lay in her hands. When morning came, I whispered many amorous things in her ear, and bit her gently on the breast so that she might remember me. Throughout the day, I knelt and kissed her legs and feet, and in return she produced a handkerchief from her pocket and gave it to me, saying, "Here, take this to keep." It bore an embroidered picture of a gazelle. I put it in my pocket, and we agreed to meet that night, and every night forever. I returned home in an intoxication of passion, swaying left and right. I entered the house to deem my cousin in bed, but she jumped up quickly to greet me, wiping away the tears with her sleeve as they fell down her cheeks. She knew without having to ask that I had finally achieved what I so desired, and so she asked me, "Did you recite to her the lines, as I asked of you?" I replied that I had forgotten to do so, and showed her the handkerchief with the gazelle embroidered upon it. My cousin examined it carefully and then asked if she could keep it. I readily agreed, and when the time came for me to go to my beloved, Azetus reminded me that I must recite the lines to her, I had to confess that I had forgotten them, and so she repeated them to me over and over. I made my way to the garden, murmuring the lines to myself so as to memorize them. There she was, waiting for me. We you into each other's arms, and then she threw herself on my lap until we groaned with pleasure, and then we ate and drank, and then started to make love all over again until the break of day. Before I left her, I remembered to say the lines Azetus had taught me. "Lovers, in the name of God, tell me, how can one relieve this endless desperation?" Hearing these lines, my beloved's eyes led with tears, and she said back to me, he should conceal his love and hide, showing only his patience and humility. I reached home, overjoyed because I had remembered to carry out my cousin's wishes, but I found Azetus ill in bed with my mother sitting beside her, trying to console her. "Did you say the lines to her?" Azetus asked immediately, even though she was very unwell. I answered her happily, "Yes," and she said this back to me, he should conceal his love and hide, showing only his patience and humility. Hearing my words, my cousin writhed in her bed like a snake. My mother shouted at me, "Have you no shame, you self-age, frivolous and thankless young man? How dare you spend the whole night out of the house and then return without asking after any of us, not even Azetus, who is in such poor health?" I could think of nothing to say, other than that every breath I took was for my beloved, and so I remained silent. When my mother Nally left us, Azetus told me the answer I was to give to my beloved. He tried to show fair patience, but could only find a heart that was like with an ease. I recited these lines to my beloved that night after another reunion which words cannot describe. My beloved wept just as she had. This first time I recited Azetus' lines to her, and answered with these lines: "If he cannot counsel his patience to conceal his secrets, nothing will serve him better than death." When I returned home, Azetus was not waiting for me, but lay in bed. While my mother tried to get her to eat and drink, I noticed how pale my cousin was, how her eyes had sunk into her face, and how emaciated she was. I felt great pity overwhelm me, and so I approached her bed as she whispered to me, "Aziz, dearest to my heart, did you recite the lines to her?" I nodded, assuring her that I had done as she wished, and recited the answer: "If he cannot counsel his patience to conceal his secrets, nothing will serve him better than death." How I wished then that I had remained silent, because she fainted. When she heard my words, my mother came in and sprinkled rose water on her face and revived her. I sat beside her, trying to comfort and soothe her. Azetus smiled at me with the utmost tenderness and made me memorize another couplet for my beloved that evening: "I have heard, obeyed, and now must I die. Salutations to she who tore us apart." After we had made love later that evening, I recited these lines, and my beloved cried out loud in sorrow and said, "O God, the one who spoke these lines has died." She wept and asked who this person was. "My cousin Azetus," I explained, "who lives for our union and who was waiting for me to come back from the hammam on the day our contract of marriage was to be signed, while I sat before your window, hypnotized, as still as a statue with a bird perched on its head. I told her that Azadas had been the one who had deciphered all of the signs and messages, and that it was she we must thank for it. It was only because of Azadas that I had reached the garden and consummated my desire for her. My beloved sighed and spoke as though addressing Azadas directly. What a pity, Azadas, that you so regretted your youth, and then she urged me, go and see her at once, before she dies. I hurried back home, greatly distressed, and when I reached our home I heard great cries and wails and weeping, and I was told that my cousin had died. My mother attacked me, weeping, may God never forgive you for her loss and regard you as solely to blame for Azadas' death. We attended her funeral and buried her, and my mother never ceased to ask me, what have you done to cause her to die from pain and grief? I have done nothing, mother, was my answer. But my mother continued to reproach me, saying, I don't believe you. Tell me what went on between you, because as Azadas lay dying, she opened her eyes and asked me to tell you that she would never blame you and that she prayed that God would not punish you, since all that you had done was take her from this world to the Eternal One, and she asked me to urge you to say to the one whom you visit each night, loyalty is good, treachery is bad. She hoped that these words would help you, and as she died she said that she felt pity for you in this life and in the next. She wailed and moaned, and added, my Azadas left you something, but she made me promise that I would give it to you only when I see you wailing and mourning for her. And yet, despite my great sadness for my cousin, I found myself hurrying at the usual time to the garden, with nothing in my heart except passion and desire for my beloved, and nothing in my mind but her beautiful face and lovely body. As soon as she saw me entering the garden, she asked about my cousin, and I told her that she had died. She pulled herself from my arms, saying, you caused her to regret her youth, and you killed her. But I assured my lover that I was not responsible for her death, and I repeated Azadas' instructions, saying, loyalty is good, treachery is bad. When my beloved heard this, she wept, saying, may God Almighty have mercy on Azadas, for she saved you from me even after death. She knew that I intended to harm you, but now be assured that I shall not. I was surprised and shocked by her words, and so I asked her, hurt me? But are we not lovers? Does each of us not feel only compassion and loyalty to the other? You're so young, she answered, and your heart is innocent. While we women have our wiles and tricks, you must promise not to trust any woman, young or old, except for me, especially now that your cousin is no longer here to protect you. Then she asked me to take her to Azadas' grave, and she carved these words on my cousin's headstone. I passed an ancient grave, on which grew 7 red anemones. Whose tomb is this? I asked, and the earth replied, tread carefully, a lover lies here. She then distributed alms for the soul of Azadas to the needy and the poor. A year passed, and yet my beloved waited for me each night as if on a hot griddle, while I would pounce upon her as if I was an eagle. We would cling to each other and make love with great fervor, and we rarely mentioned poor Azadas. If ever we spoke of her, my beloved would sigh and say, how I wish that I had met her and knew her story, for then I would have been more careful. Everything continued smoothly and with great happiness until one day, as I was heading for the garden, an old woman stopped me and asked if I would read to her a letter from her son, from whom she'd had no word since he's departed on a voyage. In spite of my state of great intoxication and desire, I agreed to help her. I read the letter and assured the old woman that her son was alive and well, and then I set out once again, but the old woman followed me and asked if I was willing to read the letter to her daughter, because she would refuse to believe that her brother was safe. Just read the letter out loud from the alleyway, she pleaded, and then my daughter will hear you and believe that her brother is alive. The old woman hurried to the door and opened it, and I saw a hand stretched out holding the letter, and a melodious voice called Is that you, mother? But as I drew closer, the old woman pushed me into the house and locked the door, and I realized that I had fallen into a trap. The girl who stood before me was both beautiful and coquettish. She asked me, in a voice which had now become quite harsh, "Tell me, Aziz, do you love life or death?" "Life, of course," I answered. "Great, then marry me," was her reply. "I would hate to marry someone like you," I shrieked. "If you marry me, you will save yourself from the daughter of al-Zahawi al-Dawahi." "But who is the daughter of al-Zahawi al-Dawahi?" Hearing this, the girl called to her mother, "Come here, mother. He claims not to know the daughter of al-Zahawi al-Dawahi." She cackled with laughter, and her mother joined in. "So you don't know who she is," the girl said, still laughing. "She's the one you've been with every night for 1 year, 4 months, and 2 days, the one you meet each night in the garden. And she is the one who kills her lovers one by one. Why has she not yet killed you? This is what we wish to know." My heart was pounding at what I had heard. "Do you know her?" Then I asked. "I know her just as time knows all tragedies," was the girl's reply. "But what I do not know is how you have survived." I found myself telling the girl and her mother the whole story about my beloved and how Azadis had helped me to be with her. And then I repeated Azadis' now message to my beloved: "Loyalty is good, treachery is bad." "Now I understand," the girl said. "Do you know that these words saved you from the daughter of al-Zahawi al-Dawahi? Listen, you're still a young man, unaware of the ways of women and the treachery of older women in particular. Let us marry. I shall require nothing of you except that you live with me like a cock." "A cock? But I don't know how a cock lives." The girl laughed, and so did her mother, and the girl laughed harder and harder until she fell down on her bottom, saying, "What does a cock do with his life other than eat, drink, and fuck?" I was embarrassed and didn't know where to look, but the girl showed no shame. Instead, she ordered me, "Go on, prepare yourself to be strong, and to fuck me just as hard and often as you can." Then her mother appeared with the 4 witnesses. I looked towards the door, thinking I must escape, but the girl said, "Everything is locked tight. Even an ant could not get out of here." Her mother hurried up and lit 4 candles, and then a notary drew up the marriage contract, the girl testing it on her own behalf that she had received the full dowry payment from me, both installments, paid the notary, and then bade everyone leave. Then she disappeared and returned wearing only a see-through nightdress, threw herself on the bed, and began to moan and writhe, murmuring, "I am your wife now." She kept on moaning and writhing until I could wait no longer. I thrust into her, and we reached our climax together, screaming with joy and ecstasy until our voices reached the street. But when I woke the next morning, I was gripped by fear and panic at what I had done, and I trembled to think that I had stayed away from my beloved that evening. I hurried to dress, thinking all the time some diabolical excuse for my absence, which would convince her of my innocence. But the girl rose from the bed and stood with her hands on her head, saying, "Where do you think you're going? Do you believe that entering a bath is the same as leaving it? Do you think that I am like the daughter of al-Zahawi al-Dawahi, that you can spend the night with me and leave in the morning? Well, I have something to tell you about this house. It is locked up all year round, except for 1 day." I was mortified to hear this, and I looked around to see a way to flee. If I were you, I won't waste my time trying to escape, for the house is sealed, the gates, the doors, and the windows. But don't worry, we have enough provisions to last us a whole year. I promise that you shall eat only the choicest delicacies, and that the months will pass by in the blink of an eye if one lives happily like a cock. She laughed, and I laughed with her, and she spread herself out on the bed, moaning, and in this way I was imprisoned for an entire year, which ended with her bearing me a son. At the beginning of the new year, the huge gates swung open, and the doors and windows were all wide, and men hurried in bearing provisions. I rose quickly to my feet, thinking that I would leave. But my wife made me wait until the evening, saying, "You must leave at exactly the time you arrive." I was terrified that she would imprison me for another year, but she followed her promise and let me out, on condition that I would return before the gate was closed. She made me swear an oath on the Holy Koran, the sword, and the promise of divorce that I would not be late. I hurried immediately to the garden and found the gate open and my beloved sitting with her head on her knees. She seemed frail and sick, but she was happy to see me. "Praise be God that you are safe. How did you know that I would come to you tonight?" I asked her. "I have been waiting for you every evening for 12 months," she answered. I rushed to her and took her in my arms, and she seemed to come alive again. "Now tell me what happened to you," she said, in a voice light with longing and curiosity. I told her everything, and she seemed calm and understanding my situation, and so lulled into a feeling of peace and security. I told her I must return to my wife at daybreak. She fell into a rage and screamed and scolded. "I could have destroyed you at the outset, but your cousin Azidas protected you from me." She looked at me with eyes lit with all the hatred in the world, and said, "Anyhow, you're married now and you have a son, and so you're of no use to me. By God, I shall make that whore sorry you won't exist for her or for me, for I shall cut your throat like a goat." I trembled with fright and pleaded with her and begged her forgiveness, but she gave a loud cry, and 10 slaves appeared from nowhere and pushed me to the ground and tied my wrists and ankles with ropes while she sharpened a huge knife, ignoring my pleas. "Killing you is the least I can do, as revenge for your cousin." I nearly fainted when I saw the knife in her hand, but I went on, imploring her, calling for God, but in vain, for she kept on sharpening the knife. As she came towards me, God gave me the inspiration to cry out, "Loyalty is good, treachery is evil." When she heard my words, my beloved turned assassin cried out, "Be assured that it is your cousin who has saved you, both in her life and in death." I took a deep breath of relief, but my beloved continued, "I will not let you go in peace. However, I must leave you with a scar that will shame you throughout your life and take revenge upon that whore." Then she ordered the slaves to light the ray, and 2 of them sat down upon me, pinning me still, and then she cut off my penis, and I screamed the scream of death and fainted, only to come to my senses when she gave me a cup of wine to drink and said, "Now you may leave and go anywhere you desire." She kicked me hard, and I stood up with great difficulty and tottered step by step. How I got there I do not know, to my wife and child's home. I collapsed at the door, which still stood open, fainted, and lost consciousness. When I awoke, I was lying in bed, and my wife was calling out, "Her mother, come and witness this. Aziz is a woman now." I fell into a deep sleep, and when I woke, I had been thrown out into the alleyway, and the gates were securely fastened. I wept and wailed, and Nellie managed to stand, just like an insect with a broken wing. I walked until I reached our house. I could hear my mother inside weeping. "Where is Aziz? Is he dead or alive?" When she saw me, she knelt in front of me and kissed the ground, thanking God that I was safe, but I collapsed again, unable to answer her questions, so intense was the pain. A few days later, I had recovered lucidly to tell my mother what had happened to me at the hands of the daughter of al-Zahawi, al-Dawahi. My mother thanked God once more that my life had been spared and that I had not been slaughtered. She cared for me and nursed me until I began to regain my strength and health. When I Nellie left my bed, I gazed at where my cousin Azatus had sat and wept and recited her poems and waited for my return. All the while, eaten with jealousy, my abandonment must have tormented her. Yet she bore it in silence and with great patience. I began to weep, crying out, "Azatus, Azatus, son, now you deserve to see what your cousin left you." My mother told me. She went and fetched a small box and opened it and took out handkerchief wrapped inside a piece of cloth together with a letter. It was the handkerchief embroidered with a gazelle, given to me by the daughter of al-Zahawi al-Dawahi. The letter was from Azetas, warning me not to return to my beloved if she mistreated me. Keep this picture of the gazelle, she wrote, for it consoled me while you were away from me. I know that you will remember me, but only when I no longer help you, and that you will think of me with love and tenderness, but only when it is too late. When I had read Azeda's letter, I fell into despair and melancholy. I sighed and asked myself, where were my kindness and compassion, my heart and mind, when I saw my cousin engulfed in such grief and sadness? I was preoccupied only with myself. I wept, and my mother wept with me, and I couldn't sleep for many nights. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Azetas waiting for me on the day our marriage contract was to be drawn. I saw Azetas as I kicked her, when she poured rose water to revive me, and when she explained and interpreted the gestures of my beloved, and I saw her face showing forgiveness despite her sorrow, which had burrowed deep inside her soul like woodworm. I watched her as she withered slowly, slowly, for my sake, and her words, if you asked for my eye, cousin, I would pull it out from beneath my eyelid for you, rang in my ears. Days and nights passed, then weeks and months, and Azeda's face never left me, nor did her echoing voice quieten, but still I heard her saying over and over, if you asked for my eye, cousin, I would pull it out from beneath my eyelid for you. And then one day I plucked out my own eye, calling even through the excruciating pain, if you asked for my eye, cousin Azedas, I would pull it out from beneath my eyelid for you. I renounced all of life's pleasures, which had once made me so careless, self-essential, and indeed erring to others, wanting only to expiate my cruelty to my cousin Azedas. I stretched out my hand to help the tormented, and little by little I found that my plucked eye gave me peace and serenity. I set out to roam the wide world, my blanket the sky and the stars in the heavens, and my bed the ground, until I reached Baghdad. There I followed a path at random, which led me to a dervish with a plucked eye like mine. He too was searching for eternal truth. We talked together until night fell, and this was when a third dervish found us, and we three sought somewhere to sleep. Then fate led us to your house, and you welcomed us with kindness and generosity, and now I stand before you, awaiting your verdict. The dervish fell silent. Stroke your head and go, the mistress of the house told him. But the dervish answered, if my lady permits me to listen to the other stories, I would be most grateful. Yes, you may, was her answer. The second dervish came forward and began.
Like, comment, and subscribe.